Autofaze. On this video, it's part 2 of the Nova Project rocker repair. That's right, no more rust as you saw in the first video. Question of the day. Have you ever spray bombed a car and been completely disappointed? I know I have. Well, today...
I did too. I did too.
So, side note, I once spray painted this black bagged and bodied S10 teal green, and I thought it was the best thing ever. I painted it at night with a rattle can.
It's funny that was your rattle can experience because mine was a seafoam green, but on a Honda Civic hatchback in a garage. My nostrils were blue for days.
Well, in this video, we're doing it in the garage, but it's going to be a lot better because Tyler with Bronson Speed is in the house. He's going to absolutely rock this thing. I'm going to learn something. You're going to learn something. As you can see in the background, don't look too much, but we already got the primer down. We're going to go over that right after this intro. But before we do that, Tyler, tell us what we're about to get into today.
Man, so we are picking up where we left off with the fabrication. So we're getting into the bodywork, getting into the primer. We cover quite a bit of details on both of those, so stay tuned all the way through paint.
Now, for someone that's new, kind of like me, that doesn't know much, that only has experience with the rattle cans, what would you tell someone that's watching this video that's interested in doing this repair themselves all up to this point that says, well, I bought it the cheapest gun I can find. What's the number one tip you give them before we start watching the video on what's going to happen behind us?
Well, as you've seen throughout the duration of this video, it doesn't require a lot of fancy tools. You don't have to go out and buy the most expensive, the best. That mostly is the same with small paint guns, cheap paint guns. They'll last you a little while. But man, honestly, all of your product tells you your mixing ratios. Generally a 50-50, 60-40 overlap. I would say that the best place to start is picking up and just spraying. I mean, that's gonna be your fastest key to learn, is just doing it.
My favorite quote from the part 1, I know you guys are probably getting bored, we're gonna get to the fun stuff, so bear with me, but my favorite quote from part 1 is, "There's nothing fancy here, man. We're in a garage."
We're in a garage. It doesn't require all the fancy stuff. We're having fun doing it. And man, I mean, I like to think we're making stuff look cool too.
Heck yes, well, that's what it's all about, right?
Absolutely.
Good friends, awesome hot rods. Let's get to it.
Are all welded up and then ground right back down. I took this electric grinder with the hard fat wheel on it to knock down my welds quickly, and then I just went through with the belt sander and the angle grinder, leveled them back out, prettied them up, made it look nice, and then I followed that up with 80 grit on a DA to just kind of finish the metal out and get it ready for primer, bodywork, everything we're about to do in the next steps.
Do you always fiberglass the patch panel?
Just where my welds are, because it's more water resistant than regular body filler is.
What are we adding to the glass Bondo?
Just a little bit of cream hardener. And it's red, so that way when you mix it in, it kind of turns that brown. If you use a blue hardener, it just makes it a slightly darker green, so it's harder to tell if it's fully mixed up. Whereas if you change the color to brown.
It's cool to see the whole process.
Yeah, you didn't get all of this process when we did your floors because there was no body work.
Why does Bondo get such a bad rap?
Because it's one of the cheaper products, but you can also buy it on the shelf at most auto parts stores. So, do-it-yourselfers probably gave it a bad rap. It is a cheaper formula, cheaper product, making it achievable for anybody to buy and use. Certain quality or certain Bondo brand products are decent. I don't use a whole lot of it. I'd rather more of a premium filler, but I also don't use much actual body filler. I use more glaze than anything.
What's the difference between that stuff that you just mentioned and what we're doing here?
This is a more of a water resistant, corrosion resistant product. Body filler, and this is a very thick building material. Body filler is thinner than this. You don't have the same durability that this would have on a base coat like this. And then glaze is like body filler, but a lot thinner.
Right.
So it doesn't build as high or as quickly.
Huh, interesting. Since this is so thick, of course, we will have to sand and shape this down.
Yep. Most of what I just put on will actually get sanded off.
Really?
Yep.
Huh. So what's the main difference in this compared to what we just did?
No fiberglass.
No fiberglass.
No fiberglass. This is like a polyester body filler. And this goes over everything, not just primarily on our welds.
How much this will remain after you sand it twice?
Not a whole lot. I generally sand off at least 50% of what I put on.
Mm. So basically most patch panels before paint will always have filler in them.
Yep. Yep. Because you're not, I mean, unless I took 20, 25 hours to get that metal
Right.
100%, you know, I could have, but it had been 20, 25
Right.
hours just getting the metal right.
So that's why a lot of guys say the old school method that if you can stick a magnet on a rear quarter, that they didn't replace the whole thing, they just replaced the wheel well. Is that where that comes from?
It's if a magnet will stick, then there's not too much body filler, is what they used to say.
Right.
But you couldn't tell if like a panel had been patched or not off of that, because you don't know where they might have patched, you don't know where they might have body worked.
Right.
There's a lot of variables that go
So
into
if
that.
it doesn't stick, they used way too much,
Correct.
and
Yes.
it's probably going to flake later on.
Yes, it'll eventually crack out.
So run.
Yep. Yep.
$80 and you'll drop it down to what now?
I'll jump up to 150, and then probably 240 on the DA, and then I will glaze. I like stepping things out with the DA after I straight line sand it, because it is less susceptible to shrink back.
What are you feeling for?
Flatness. Feeling to see how straight it is.
Right.
I can tell from here to here that it's still got a high spot here and then a low spot here, just from feeling it.
why would a fella use glaze over the body filler that we did?
Because it's a lot more fine of a material. It sands out really, really nice. And it's not as susceptible to pinholes as much as a medium or heavyweight body filler is. And it spreads so nice.
Is it necessary?
No. A lot of people don't use glaze. It's a personal preference of mine that I've found. I just like to go over all of my body work with a glaze putty. You can see a couple of pinholes in what I did, and I used just my regular lightweight filler, and it'll still pinhole. This stuff, just not as much.
So this is going to take care of any pinholes that we might have after.
This will take care of everything that I don't like about a lightweight, medium weight body filler. It'll take care of all the rest of the stuff that I don't like. And it's just a good top coat. It makes everything nice and even. Basically from paint edge to paint edge. There's different ways to mix body filler too. Some people argue that I'm mixing air bubbles into it right now. I've been doing it a long time. I've mixed it a lot of different ways. And whether or not it's mixing air pockets into it for pinholes, I mean, you can see some of the air pockets. I think it's more of a technique of how you spread it versus how you mix it. Because once I started getting the hang of how I liked to spread things, I started minimizing pinholes even in regular body filler.
Yeah, you can tell how thin it is. Wow. Super thin.
And this is 95% of what I use. I don't touch much regular body filler. 95% of the time it's a glazed putty like this because I just don't like body filler. So I get it right in the middle. And I don't have to do as much body work.
And we'll let this dry as well, right?
Yep. Just like the regular build body filler and the fiberglass.
Then after this dries, then we do the 3 grit sanding method of 80. What was the other one?
150 and then 240.
After that, then we're off the prime, right?
Yes, sir.
We are moving right along. Man, you can just tell how smooth that is.
Yeah.
Holy cow.
So as you can see, I've pretty well body worked everything. I used fiberglass to cover up my welds. Then I used a lightweight body filler. Then I used a glazed putty, working it from 80 grit all the way up to 180 on the block. And now I'm going to step it up to 240 on the DA and get my straight line scratches out of here. And then I'm going to be ready to mask up for primer. I'm going to metal etch it first, just on our bare metal spots, just a light dusting, just to give it a chemical bond when the primer goes on for it to bite into. Alright, so my metal etch has flashed off and we are good to go to move on to a regular filler primer. It's not very often I use an aerosol, but no bigger than this job is. Aerosols will do just fine. They have their place, and this is fortunately one of them. But I wouldn't go and prime half of a car with an aerosol. That's just going to take forever and end up costing you more money. But again, no bigger than this repair area is. Aerosol is going to be just fine. Make sure you shake it really well, otherwise it'll clog up and then your can will be worthless. It's always good to do a little test area, see how your pattern is, make sure everything's good. We're not too bad. Don't be lazy. Make sure you get underneath the panel. I know it's a pain in the butt, but it's worth it. You just did all this work. You might as well make sure all of it's primed and locked in, ready to go.
In order to get this rocker panel into paint, the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to prep our primer. So for that we have 320 on a block. It doesn't need to be a hard block because we've already done all the straight block work. So just a soft block with 320, and then generally I'd step it out with 320 on a dual action or 400 on a dual action sander, and prep the rest of the panel with a gray or red Scotch-Brite, and then we are ready to move on to the paint. So then you just have your hot rod black that you mix in your activator and your reducer. I'm gonna spray 2, maybe 3 coats on this since it's a kind of a single stage paint. Base coat, clear coat, I'd probably do 3 to 4 base coats, and then 3 or 4 clear coats. This one we're gonna do 2 to 3 depending on how well it covers. As you can see here, we're primed. Now we are ready to 320 block it, get it ready for paint. First and foremost, when you do block work, it's good to have a guide coat, whether it's a dry powdered guide coat such as I have here, or just a cheap aerosol black spray paint. That works fine, it just tends to clog your paper up a little more. So with the aerosol, you would just lightly spray it all over your panel. With the powder, you can see you just kind of shake it up a little bit, and then you just take your applicator pad, and then you just rub it on what you're wanting to block. So what this is good for is catching any lows that you may have still that end up looking like dents in your panel, which you obviously don't want. We're trying to get rid of that. But as you step up sandpaper grit, it also helps make certain you've gotten out the rougher texture, rougher coarse grit sandpaper as you're moving up to finer and finer grits. So that's guide coat. This is our 320 block. And now we just go to town blocking it. Dust management. Got the old razor blade behind the ear. Don't do that. That's just where I store them. Probably not a great idea. So after you stretch your plastic out, mask off your area of course, stretch out your plastic, then you just get your razor blade and you cut out on the side that you are painting, on that side of the masking tape. Obviously, if I cut up here, I would be releasing the plastic from the tape for the rest of the car. That's not what I want to do. I only want to release where I'm painting. All right, after you're all done, this is super, super important. Please remember to final clean, prep, solve, wax and grease remove, whatever name you want to put on it. Clean your darn panel before you spray some paint. That way there's no contaminants on it. It'll make your life easier, I promise. Now, as you can see here, in some areas I kind of burnt through the primer to the body filler. With base coat, clear coat, I would go back and I would re-spot prime those areas. With this being a single stage, you have a little more tolerance, and so we're going to roll with it. If it creates any problems in the future, which I can't imagine it will, we'll probably let you guys know. You'll see it on one of the videos, but there shouldn't be any issues with it being a single stage. So this is a 4-to-1-to-1 mix. So 4 parts paint, 1 part activator, 1 part reducer. That reducer, you can give or take a little bit on that per preference. The activator you must do exactly as your tech sheet calls for. Alright, now I'm going up.
There you have it. How to replace a Nova rocker from beginning to end. Rust, patch, paint, and body. Now all we gotta do is wait for it to dry, take this cover off, finally throw that engine and transmission in. We'll be driving this thing this year. Ooh, man. I'm excited. Thanks for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you. See you on the next one.